Hello everyone, my name is Christy and welcome to my channel Gringa Spanish. Today I want to give you a roadmap of what I think the best way is to go about learning Spanish or probably any other language, because I think if you have in your mind how that process will probably look like ahead of time, you'll do a much better job. You'll know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think that this is probably one of the biggest reasons that people get frustrated or fail, is not necessarily their fault, or it's not necessarily that the language is hard, but it's just that they just throw themselves into the deep end without really a plan of a way to learn that's going to make sense or build on itself. So I think if we go over that now, then those of you out there who want to learn Spanish from nothing, even if it's for free or not for free, you'll have an idea of what to do and how to do it. So the first step I would say is to start with simple and common phrases to give yourself context. For example, me llamo Christy. That means my name is Christy. You don't have to understand why it means that. You don't have to understand how this verb works. All you need to know is me llamo Christy means my name is Christy. You can take that sentence, you can put your name in it, and you can say it to anybody. ¿Cómo te llamas? That means what's your name? Well, this te llamas kind of looks like me llamo. Why is it different? How does that work? You're not going to worry about any of that at this stage of the game. You're just going to start learning simple and common phrases and short phrases that appear often, so that when you come across them later and you start learning more, every single word is not a problem. 2. Build your vocabulary with common nouns and verbs. Nouns are objects. The computer is a noun. The cat is a noun. Verbs are the part of a sentence that say the action that's happening. To jump is a verb. To write is a verb. To swim is a verb. To think is a verb. To speak is a verb. So for example, escribir means to write. Correo electrónico, that's a noun that means email. So why are you going to do this? You're going to start building your vocabulary with words, so that when you go and you start learning how to make sentences, you actually have words to make into a sentence. Because if you jump straight into learning sentences, you may be frustrated because you have to learn what every single word in that sentence means, and it's going to be overwhelming. So you should start with just learning words that you can then learn how to make into sentences. And this whole thing, this is an overall roadmap, but that being said, obviously it's not a step-by-step process that you're going to finish learning all of the common simple phrases in Spanish, then you're going to learn all of the words in Spanish. Obviously that's not possible. It's a continual process back and forth. That being said, the overall process should look something like these steps, especially if you're first starting. So the reason I'm telling you that is I don't want you to see step 2 and then get a Spanish dictionary and try to memorize every word. I don't think any of you are going to do that. But what I'm saying is I acknowledge the fact that you're not going to memorize every single word before you learn how grammar works. Of course not. But I would say the best way to do it is by learning words that are very common that you can then worry about making into sentences. So 3, learn words that help you to form complete sentences and force yourself to use complete sentences. A lot of language is made out of connecting words like of and the. So learn those kinds of words so that when you want to make a complete sentences, you know the connecting words that you mean and that you need, and force yourself to use complete sentences, because I think this is a roadblock for a lot of people. They'll have some common phrases and they'll have some vocabulary, but then when it's time for them to speak a complete sentence, they'll get a little nervous and unconfident and they won't even try. Actually, the reason that you should do this is because if you know these connecting words, most of the time you'll be right. There are rules that this word is used in this context but not this context. This word is used in this context and not this context. And you have to learn a little bit of that, but for the most part, if you just go with the word that you think is supposed to be there, you'll be right. So force yourself to use complete sentences. If you have somebody that can tell you if you're right or not, that helps. And if you don't, then I would say that this is a situation in which your exposure is going to help you, because you'll run into sentences that are like the one that you want to say. Then make a mental note. Okay, when I want to say go through the store, this is the word for through. Or go on the street, this is the word for on. And then make a mental note of that. 5. Learn grammatical rules to understand how verbs change in the past, present, and future tenses. Learn the grammatical rules for giving commands and directions. So in English, we conjugate verbs all of the time. And when you learn a language, one of the most important and biggest tasks that you have is to learn how to conjugate verbs in that language. Conjugation means when you take a verb and you say who's doing it and when they did it. So in English, if I use the word jump, if I say I jump, you know that I'm talking about me, I'm jumping, and then I am jumping now, or I jump on a continual basis. If I say he jumps, that got an S at the end because it's conjugated differently. And you don't even think about that. Or what if I say I jumped? Jump becomes jumped with an ED at the end, and that tells you that I already did it. I did it in the past. So in English, we conjugate verbs all of the time, and we don't even think about it. So one of the biggest tasks that you have when learning Spanish is to learn how to conjugate verbs. And that sounds so overwhelming at first, but don't worry. The words in Spanish follow consistent rules of how the word is going to change, if it's in the past, the present, or the future, and based on who's doing it. I jump, you jump, he jumps, she jumps. They follow consistent rules. There are irregular verbs, just like in English, which means words that completely break the rules. The past tense might look completely different from the present tense, which also happens in English. But the good thing is that these words tend to be very, very common ones that are easy to remember which ones they are. And the other thing is that they are so common that you hear them so often that you will very easily develop an intuition for how they work in the irregular sense, what they become, instead of following the rules that other verbs would follow. So don't let that intimidate you. So lastly, I would say is exposure. Practice, listen, read. Listen to Latin music and read the lyrics. That is one of my favorite things that I used to do when I was learning Spanish. I was like a 12-year-old girl. I would listen to Prince Royce, then I would go look up the words in the song and see what they meant, and I would be like, why is this word this way and not this way? Why is it conjugated like this and not this? It was one of my favorite things to do. I actually have some videos where we analyze the lyrics to songs because it's so easy and it's fun. Even if you don't have friends that can help you practice Spanish, you can go listen to Prince Royce speaking to you in Spanish. So talk in Spanish with your friends, and if you don't, that's okay. If you do, you're very lucky, and you should say like, hey, I want to practice, can we just try? And it'll be really, really hard and frustrating at first, and you're going to want to switch back to English. But if you can resist that temptation, then you will improve so much by forcing yourself to speak in Spanish with your friends. Buy a book in Spanish. So my advice for this is, if you want to try reading a book in Spanish, make it a book that you've already read in English, because books tend to be written in the past tense. Like if you think about Harry Potter, the words are not written like Harry walks to the professor's office. No, it's written in the past tense. Harry walked to the professor's office, and then she yelled at him. It's all in the past tense, which is not how we speak to each other most of the time. We tell each other stories often, but most of our conversational language is not in the past tense, which can make reading a book in Spanish really confusing if you're just learning. So my advice would be to buy a book that you've already read in English. And date someone who only speaks Spanish. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. It'll be very motivating, but don't do that. Okay, so I wanted to repeat one more time that this is all a continual process. I think these are good overall steps to think about yourself, to think to yourself when you're learning, what goal am I achieving in this? And I think it's really important to follow a structure similar to what I've laid out, especially when you're just starting. But that being said, obviously there's some going back and forth between all of these. Exposure is a great way to practice, but you might come across a new grammatical rule and then you go back and review your grammar. Or you might come across a word you don't recognize that you need to look up. So this is all a continual process. But I'm saying the best way to get started is probably to do something that looks like these steps or follows these steps. I think that that is the biggest reason that people might get frustrated or not succeed in learning a language, is because they just jump into the deep end and they want to figure everything out by themselves. So I would say my biggest advice, and the thing that I think frustrates most people, is trying to skip over learning grammar. So if you just skip to exposure, practice, and you completely skip over grammar, think about it. Basically what you're saying is that you expect that you on your own can go out there with a language you don't know and deduce the grammatical rules by yourself. I know grammar is boring and you probably don't want to sit down and listen to a grammar lesson, but that being said, it is much better and much faster for you to listen to somebody explain the rules to you, or to read about the rules so that you have a basic idea of what's going on, even if you don't sit down and memorize all the rules at once. If you have some kind of basic idea of what's going on, you're going to do much better in this step of understanding and having those lights go off in your brain than if you just throw yourself into the deep end and expect that you are going to deduce all of the grammatical rules by yourself. So that being said, I would say if you're learning Spanish, make learning the grammar important to you. I've seen people do that and it just blows my mind. Obviously, they still don't speak Spanish. So, you know, grammar, it's boring, but it's something that it's so much easier if you just take the time to learn a rule here and there. You don't have to overwhelm yourself. Just go learn one rule. Go learn how to conjugate in the present tense. The next week, go learn how to conjugate in the past tense. Then learn the difference between ser and estar, like things like that. Don't overwhelm yourself, but don't expect yourself to be able to figure it out like a baby would just by listening to everything around you, because you're not going to have your parents talking to you like mama, papa, like that's not going to happen. So if you do it just by skipping to this, you're a genius, and leave me a comment below. Okay guys, so that's my advice for learning a new language, especially Spanish in this case. What I want to do with this channel is give people a good resource for learning for free. I know it's not the greatest video or audio, but that being said, I used to learn calculus from Patrick JMT, who had videos basically exactly like this. So I think if you're willing to put up with the poor video and audio, I want to make a free resource for you that you can use to learn Spanish, because I really don't think in this day and age that you need to pay for it. I had noticed when I was looking for Spanish lessons on YouTube that a lot of what I saw was ads for paid services, and I don't think it needs to be like that. So thank you for watching. You can check out some of my other videos, use other resources, but the most important thing is to be consistent. I used to listen to Spanish on the bus, like I said, going to classes. It's just important that you don't give up and go for a long period of time without using it, because it will take time, but at some point it will click. So, you know, it took me months to get to that point where I started listening and hearing things and being like, oh wait, I understand that, that's awesome. And still to this day, depending on somebody's accent and where they're from, I'll have a really hard time understanding people. So it's not perfect. But the most important thing is that you keep exposing yourself, because at some point it is going to come together in your brain and make sense. Okay guys, that's it for me today. Leave a comment below, subscribe if you want to learn Spanish, and have a great day.